welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be seeing what are the best books that I've read according to Goodreads. I've seen a lot of other people doing this video lately and I was very curious what Goodreads thinks are the best books that I've read. What I did was I sorted all of the books that I read by average rating and I took the top 15. Some of them, the entire series was in the top 15, so I only counted it as one spot, but it is a very interesting list. So let's just get into it. I'm gonna start at number 15 and work my way up to number 1, the best book that I've read. And I'll kind of, as we're going, I'll tell you guys my opinions on all of them, if I liked them, if I think that they are the best books. So starting with number 15 is a book that I am so happy made it into this list, and that is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. This has a 4.35 average rating. This is a dark romance. You guys know I have not shut up about this book since I read it. It is my all-time favorite romance. It is so amazing and I'm so glad that it has such a high rating. It does surprise me a little bit, I guess, because I would assume books that have very dark or triggering content in them might be a little bit more divisive, but I guess when I think about it, it makes a little bit of sense because the people who pick up dark romances are people I feel like who already know what they're getting into and are expecting the subject material, as opposed to other books where maybe you're blindsided by it. So this is a romance about a woman who is kidnapped alongside her sister's fiance, and they're chained up in a basement and held there for several weeks. They undergo some really horrific things there, and then finally they escape. The majority of the book is about what happens to them afterwards and how they navigate the trauma and integrating back into life after experiencing something so terrible. They have such a beautiful love story. I cannot say enough good things about this book. I think that 4.35 is even low, but very excited that this one was on the list as it's one of my favorite books. And so number 14 is a book that shocked me that's on this list because the only thing I have to say about this book is that it's average, and that is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. So this has a 4.37 average rating. This is a YA thriller. I think I gave this 3 stars. It's not a bad book, but it's just average. It's nothing special, it's nothing exciting, it's pretty predictable and basic. So I think it's surprising to me that this was on this list. You'll notice as we're going through, there are very few YA books. I think there's only 3 YA books in my top 15. And then even beyond that, I think that the next YA book didn't come up until the top 30. I think just in general, YA, from my observation, tends to have lower average ratings. They're usually somewhere in the mid to high 3s. So the fact that this somehow is one of the 3 that is in my top 15 is just weird to me. I don't know. I don't get it. I wish that I did. I don't. I definitely don't think this is a best book. Number 13 is From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. This also has a 4.37. I get it, but I'm also surprised. This is a 500-page contemporary romance, and I do not think any contemporary book needs to be that long. Maybe if you're a fantasy or a paranormal or something where you're building a world, sure, 500 pages. But a contemporary book? What are you doing with that many pages? What's happening? There's no reason for it to be that long. I liked this book when I read it. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. However, it is a very slow burn book. Probably one of the most slow burn romances I've ever read. I know that's Mariana Zapata's thing. So the people who read her books, again, I feel know what they're getting into. They know that they're going to be getting 500 page of dragged out, drawn out torment. I don't even think the couple kissed until the last 30 pages, which is insane. So I guess it kind of surprises me that this is on the list because I could see a lot of people reading this and just thinking it's too slow and too drawn out and too long. But Mariana Zapata is very popular. People really love her. I probably will never read one of her books again. I experienced the 500-page slow burn once. I have no desire to experience it again. So for me, I wouldn't really classify this as a best book. Number 12 is a book that I read very recently, and it is a new favorite, and that is Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. This has a 4.39. This recently came out a couple months ago, so it's kind of surprising that it's already very highly rated. It had a lot of ratings too. I only picked books in this list that had a decent amount of ratings, so it wasn't skewed. This is an amazing fantasy book. I don't think I've even really talked about this on my channel yet, but it's definitely a favorite of the year. T. Fisher is becoming a new favorite author of mine, and this is such a fun quest fantasy where this girl is setting out on a quest to save her sister from her abusive king husband, and in order to kill him, she has to complete a couple tasks in order to break a curse that's protecting him. So she teams up with a very eclectic and unique group of people and a demon chicken to break this curse. It is so fun, and something about T. Fisher's fantasy books have this really nostalgic feeling to me. They remind me specifically of like 80s and 90s fantasy, like The Princess Bride, Labyrinth, Willow, kind of that genre of fantasy. So this is definitely a best book for me. Number 11 on this list is Raybearer by Jordan E. Fueco. This has a 4.39. This is a YA fantasy book that I loved. I think it is one of the best YA fantasies that I've ever read, definitely within the last couple of years. I sort of recently have gotten very burnt out on YA fantasy. I felt like I was reading the same stories over and over, and it was just getting stale. Something about the way that Jordan E. Fueco took all these very common YA fantasy tropes but twisted them and delivered them in a way that felt so fresh and unique. When I read this, one of the things that I kind of equated her writing to was N.K. Jemisin. They have a very similar style with how they craft a narrative and explore world building. Obviously, N.K. Jemisin is like in a class of her own, but I think that this really reminded me of her style. So this is definitely a best book for me. One of the easiest 5 stars I gave last year. Number 10 on this list is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This has a 4.40. This is the first book that is not any surprise that it showed up in my top 15. This is a very popular book. I gave this 3.5 stars. I had read Circe by Madeline Miller and I really didn't like it, so my expectations for this were very low and I ended up enjoying it. However, I don't get the hype around Madeline Miller. I just don't think I'm really the reader for her, which is crazy because on paper it's sounds like I would be, but I just haven't really loved her books. I mean, this was fine, but people make it out to be like one of the best things ever, and it was just fine. So this is not a best book for me. Number 9 is The Brutal Truth by Lee Witter. This has a 4.44, and this is a book that I love and I never see anybody talking about. It is basically a queer sapphic Devil Wears Prada about a woman who becomes the assistant to this very high profile, successful businesswoman, and over the course of the book they end up falling in love. It's a very slow burn, but unlike how I feel about Mariana Zapata, the slow burn is worth it. This is one of my favorite female-female adult romances, so I'm very thrilled to see that it came up in this list, especially too because I feel like this is such like a hidden gem book that not a lot of people know about. Number 8 is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This has a 4.45, which does not surprise me at all. This is another book that I kind of assumed would show up on this list. This is one of my favorite books. I loved this book so much. I think I read it at the exact perfect time of my life. I read it like the first week of the pandemic when everything shut down, and this book is just like an instant hug. So no surprise, this is a best book for me. Number 7 on this list is Homegoing by Ya Gassi. This has a 4.47. I could swear that I own this book. I have no idea where it is though, but this is a book that I read a while ago and it's still something that I think about from time to time. It's a really, really interesting story that is following multiple generations, 2 sisters who are separated and sent to have very, very different lives, and then how that sort of impacted the rest of their descendants. It's such an interesting read, very difficult at times. It deals with a lot of very intense topics, but I really loved this book. I definitely would consider it a best book. Number 6 on this list is the Mindfuck series by S.T. Abbey. This one I had to get a little crafty with what the average rating is because all 5 of the books showed up kind of in my top 15, but all at different spots. So I kind of just combined all of them and got the average rating for the 5 books. So the average rating of all 5 is 4.47. This is my absolute favorite thriller. This is following a woman who was very brutally attacked when she was a teenager. So for 11 years, she has been plotting revenge on the men who attacked her. And she has been learning everything that she can about becoming a serial killer. And she is now enacting her revenge and killing all of these men in her very talented ways. But at the start of the book, she meets this guy and they go on a date and they're really hitting it off. They're falling in love. Well, plot twist, turns out he is an FBI agent who is currently investigating these serial killings that just so happen to be her, and he has no idea. It is such an amazing series. Very, very dark, but Lana as a main character is probably my favorite main character ever. I loved her so much, and it's one of those books where you are just like rooting for her so hard to get her revenge. I'm so glad that these books showed up in this list because it's definitely a best book for me, best thriller that I've read. If you love thrillers and you haven't read this yet, you are missing out. Ignore the fact that the covers are garbage and just trust me because they're amazing. Number 5 on this list is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This has a 4.48. Another one that I was predicting would show up on this list. This is an extremely popular book. I think that this is Taylor Jenkins Reid's most popular book for good reason. I absolutely loved this one. It is such an amazing book. This is one of those books that when you finish it, you want to Google Evelyn Hugo because she feels so real. The fact that I cannot watch her version of Little Women is a crime, so this is absolutely a best book. Number 4 on this list is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This has a 4.49, and this definitely does not surprise me that it is so highly rated. I feel like this is one of those YA fantasies that people who love YA love it, but also I've noticed that people who don't really like YA have read this and also really enjoyed it. I really love this book. My only critique about it is that I feel like it should have been an adult book. Of all of the YA fantasies that were coming out around this time, this is definitely the best one. It's a really brilliantly crafted story with how all of the characters connect to each other. I think that I would consider this a best book. Number 3 is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This has a 4.51, and I cannot tell you how happy this makes me that this is the number 3 best book. This is a book that I read earlier in the year that I've literally been pushing on everybody that I know, even people who don't read. So this is described as a cozy, low-stakes fantasy book, and that is exactly what it is. It is a small-scale story in a bigger fantasy world following this orc barbarian who decides to retire from the barbarian business and open up a coffee shop. And it's literally just about her trying to thrive and have a successful business in this town where nobody has ever had coffee before. They don't know what it is. So they're very suspicious about this new thing called a latte. It is so, so cute. I can't even tell you. I've been describing this book kind of as Dungeons and Dragons meets Animal Crossing. It is literally the coziest, most comforting book ever. So 100% this is a best book. Number 2 on this list is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This has a 4.52. This is my favorite sci-fi book ever, so it is no surprise to me that it is very highly rated. I don't think I've seen anybody dislike this book. This is an amazing sci-fi space travel, end of the world type of story. We're following this man who wakes up on a spacecraft and has no memory of how he got there, why he's there. He's alone there. He realizes he's on some sort of mission, but he doesn't know what it is. We're following him, figuring out what is happening. There's so many amazing surprises in this book that just made me love it so much. It's definitely a combination of like Interstellar, Arrival, Gravity, The Martian, all of those like put into one amazing epic story. This is absolutely a best book. And then number 1, which is actually 4 books. These 4 books were actually 1 through 4, so I just combined them into one, and that is Heartstopper. These collectively have an average of 4.55, making them the highest rated books that I've read, which really, when I think about it, comes at no surprise because kind of like Legends and Lattes, these are just very feel-good graphic novels. They're the type of things that, like, even if you don't absolutely love it, I can't see someone being like, you know what? I hated Heartstopper. I don't know, maybe that person exists. I think that person just needs a hug. These are such cute young adult graphic novels. They're following 2 teen boys, Charlie and Nick, as they're navigating these romantic feelings for each other. While they're not necessarily like my typical kind of read, I really loved them. They made me cry, they made me smile. So I definitely think that these are deserving of the title Best Books on Goodreads. So those are my top 15. Definitely let me know in the comments if you agree with my assessment of this list. If there are any of the books you don't think are the best, or ones that I didn't think are the best but you do, please let me know. Also, let me know if you want me to do this again but with the worst books that I've read. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!